Hello ITV marketing team. I am Mark, I'm Head of Strategy at Arena, and I want to use this video to take you through our approach, Heartbeats, that we took Rufus, Paul and Rima through in our chemistry session a couple of weeks ago. It's an approach that we'll be building on in our pitch to you on Thursday. So let's cut straight to it. You gave us a challenge which was about getting more people to spend more time with ITV. And we think there are three distinct challenges that we need to address in order to do that. One is clearly about increasing viewer share. Two, we think, is about really building the ITV Hub as a property and a service in its own right. And three is, of course, in doing that, how we build brand love for ITV specifically. So there are three market, brand and customer insights that we want to talk through that have informed our approach. First of all, the market. Now the key dynamic that we need to think about with the market is how we overcome clutter. We think that you have a much wider competitive set than just the core broadcasters if your objective is to get people to spend time with you. Of course there will be your core competitive set, and of course the on-demand platforms will be competitors too. But in fact, when you're competing for time, you're competing for a much wider group of brands. And that has an implication for how we think about what we do with your marketing and the money we spend, because it actually has to work even harder than the share of voice you spoke about in your brief. The opportunity, though, is that a lot of the entertainment category still tends to churn out a lot of wallpaper, we think. A lot of campaigns look the same, act the same in the channels that they use. And we think the opportunity is to break through that wallpaper and have a very deliberate approach that gets us to break through that wallpaper. Second, in terms of customer insight, when we took your brief and spent some time with you at the immersion session, we spoke about what we think, where we think your audience growth needs to come from, whether it needs to come from your heartland or your stretch audiences. And the reality is it has to come from both. And the reason is because of generational changes in the way that TV is being viewed. So in the short term, we know that the heartland audience is going to be increasingly important for you because we have an aging population and we know that they'll be watching more TV. But we have to think about the long-term health of the business and the brand. And we know that fundamentally viewing behaviour is starting to shift amongst younger audiences, as you can see through Ofcom data, which I'm sure you're aware of. And so we have to make sure that in what we do, we're remaining relevant to those stretchy audiences, younger audiences that aren't necessarily viewing as much as the heartland audiences are right now. And we think that for every program property that we market, we have to think about both that heartland and that stretch. Now clearly your own properties do a good job of reaching the heartland audience, and we should be focusing our paid media on what we believe is driving incremental value for the brand, which is driving those stretch audiences. Third, brand dynamic. Now of course you spoke to us about brand love, and what we wanted to show you was some data from our Meaningful Brand Survey to really point to what we think is going to drive brand love. Now what our Meaningful Brand Survey does is it looks at brand attachment in a different way, which is the amount of people who would care if a brand disappeared tomorrow. And you can see that on this axis, that's exactly what it represents. Here we are, we're ITV over here, and we're not in a bad position. Clearly you would expect BBC over here, but I think the one we really wanted to point out is where Amazon are right now. Just to be clear, this is not Amazon Prime, this is Amazon in total. But Amazon, by our reckoning, in terms of the Meaningful Brand Study, is the most meaningful brand in the UK. And why is that? It's not really got to do with love or them being a good brand. What it's got to do with is their relevance to people in their daily lives and the fact that they're really irreplaceable. And we think we have to point our sort of brand love towards being indispensable and hyper-relevant for the viewers that we speak about, particularly for both the heartland and the stretch. It has implications for how we talk to different audiences. And when you look at the entertainment category in particular, this piece of data here shows where entertainment brands and TV brands in particular under and overperform, and what the important dynamics are for customers in terms of what drives brand attachment or brand meaning. What the marketplace dot here represents is what consumers say brands are, or TV brands are delivering for them in terms of the output, the programming that they would expect to have, and the choice and the variety and the services they would access them on. And broadly speaking, they're saying that TV brands are doing this. The opportunity where brands are not delivering is in what this means for them as an audience. And these are sort of personal benefits. So these are, makes me happier, makes me smarter, saves me time, or connects me with other people. And it's these personal benefits, those benefits of relevance, that we need to think about, focus and driving as we deliver viewer marketing for your customers, and that will ultimately drive brand love. So if we take those three insights and we bring them back to the brand challenges that we spoke about at the start, what do we think these mean? Well, first of all, for increasing viewer share, we think if our objective is to cut through the clutter of of entertainment and TV marketing out there, we have to think about how we drive eyeballs, and we think that's through mouths, and that's about getting people talking about your properties and really over-engineering the idea that we have to really use our marketing to get people talking about your properties to drive a disproportionate share of voice above and beyond what we naturally have in the category. Secondly, we have to think about how we build the ITV hub and use it as a destination in its own right. In truth, it's probably a place to view catch-up TV now. We have to really start to evolve it as a destination, an entertainment destination for viewers, but also as a marketing tool. We think if we use it in the right way, we can start to move beyond the transactional relationship from driving viewers to the hub to actually driving fans, understanding who they are, what programming they like, and giving them things over and above the broadcast repeat that they expect to see on TV. And finally, when it comes to growing brand love, really we think the objective there is about telling and not showing. And we're going to have to tell audiences show audiences through the way that we drive relevance around our particular properties, around our services like the ITV hub, and the proof points that we have in the business to build relevance, and also to inject a sense of what ITV stands for as a brand in the way we behave and act in our marketing. So bringing this all together, our approach, which we call Heartbeats, and I just want to summarise the insights that I've spoke through quickly. So first of all, our challenge in the market is about combating wallpaper. Secondly, around customers, we have to think about how we build heartland and stretch audiences. And finally, at a brand level and driving brand love and doing all of this, how we drive meaningful relevance. And that's taken us to what we call the Heartbeat approach. And let me just explain what we mean by that. So if ITV is the home of popular culture, and we believe that every brand and every program and every service indeed that you have has a heartbeat. And what is that heartbeat comprised of? It's comprised of three key things over here, but really it's the DNA of the show. It's the things that draw us into view, and for us that's the IP. That's the things that draw people into view, whether that's the script writing, the talent, the cast, or the show itself. Secondly, it's the conversational currency around each show. It's those conversational hooks, the things that people talk about in the pub around the show. We have to really get smart at identifying what we think the conversational hooks for a show are and amplifying those. And finally, we think if we can combine those two things with a connection to popular culture, so something that's happening in culture today that people can relate to, we can drive a disproportionate share of conversation around our programs. And our aim is to uncover the heartbeat for every ITV show that we work on by looking at these three ingredients. And ultimately that's about getting viewers talking about our programming, our properties, before, during and after they view. And the heartbeat is going to form the centre of the approach that we talk through on the pitch in terms of the three programs you've asked us to look at specifically. We take a heartbeat and start to deliver it in comms. Well, the first thing is we have to figure out how we find a heartbeat for each show. And we don't think it should be an easy job to find a heartbeat, because we have to think very hard about those three ingredients. We have some tools that we think can help to do this, in addition to the tools that you'd have from an insight perspective. But we'll show you in the pitch how we use tools like Finio or Sysomos, or qualitative tools like Surface, which are mobile research tools, to help us do this. We also have a proprietary bit of kit in the group that we've been testing with other entertainment brands called Content.io. And what Content.io enables us to do is to use a piece of research to really get under the skin of what the different hooks and motivations and drivers are for a particular piece of content or programming for different audiences, and then to skew our comms in the right way to really reflect those hooks when we're marketing to them. And we'll talk to you a bit more in the pitch about how we use Content.io and apply it to programming. But really, I suppose the important thing about the way heartbeats play out is that we have to think about the audiences and the time period and phasing around which they play out. So once we've used these tools to identify what a heartbeat is, importantly we have to think about how that heartbeat starts to play out. We think there are three key audiences that we need to address with every heartbeat. First of all, we have instigators, which are audiences who can talk on our behalf around that show, and that we can bring a heartbeat to life for them. They could be fans of the show, they could be experts in a particular field, but ultimately there's people that we think can really get a conversation going early for us, or even in some cases create assets or content that we can use at later stages of the process. Secondly, of course, as we've spoken about, the heartland audience, and every show we think will have a heartland audience that your owned media can address fairly well, and we'll show you how that works for each of the three programs in the pitch itself. And then finally, stretch audiences. So for every show, where we think that incremental audience opportunity should come from. And of course, there'll be a bias in terms of the types of activities and comms that we use to address these audiences, where earned plays very much a role in the instigators phase, moving through to owned for your heartland audiences, and finally through more to paid activity for your stretch audiences. And in between those, we want to also introduce the idea of shared media, which is something we've been talking about, but really it's the idea that there's new forms of contra that we can be using, not just with media owners, but with brands too, in the way that we connect with audiences and partners and launch shows. How does this start to play out across the life cycle of a marketing campaign? Well, you very clearly spoke to us about having two clear phases in your thinking around priming and commitment, and we don't disagree with that. In fact, we think 80-90% of our resources around marketing should definitely be pointed at these decision-making phases. But there's just two extra ones that we want to introduce in our planning that we think map to this heartbeat approach. First of all is a seeding phase. We think the seeding phase is particularly important for doing that early work with instigators to get them talking or to create assets that we can play in later on in the life cycle of a marketing campaign. And then finally, thinking about how we fuel conversations or positive sentiment around the show once it's on air. Clearly our job is focused around the golden hours and in committing and getting viewers to view, but actually a lot of programs present opportunities for us to fuel that and generate incremental viewing as beyond that first TX, and we need to think about how we might do that for the different audiences that we have. There are some things that we've observed just speaking to you and looking at your business around earned, owned, shared and paid media that we think we want to evolve, that we think we want to apply to this heartbeat approach. So from an earned approach, we think there are more opportunities, for instance, to get influencers talking on our behalf early on around shows. We've done some interesting work with sort of YouTube and Facebook stars, for instance, with Domino's, who've created pieces of material that we've used in campaigns, but that generate reach of their own. And we think there's opportunities to work with more influencers like this, guys like Talent House, or even create vehicles that allow our audiences to talk on our behalf around shows. Things like, we're big fans of what the Straight Out of Content did with their Straight Out of Generator poster idea. In the own space, we think the opportunity to think about how we create content pieces early on in the life cycle of a show that would legitimately exist as content or viewer pieces, for instance in the ITV Hub, that we can use to drive interest around the show. So some good examples that we've seen out there are the likes of David Attenborough's 360 dinosaur video, which was released exclusively on the iPlayer in advance of the show airing, and really is content working as marketing. It's also how we use your talent, and then finally I think how we start to release content early on, all through the life cycle of a program on the hub that feels intrinsic to the hub and draws viewers into it. As I mentioned, we think there's opportunities to start to drive more shared media partnerships, not just from a conventional contra point of view, but to think about how we do this with brands who have big audiences in their own right, and can work to market programs on our behalf, but also how you bring brands together around your programming. So, you should be thinking about how you advertise in the way that you talk to advertisers, and we're big fans, for instance, of the Lego ad break, and we should be thinking about how we work with brands to do that around and themed and linked to the programming you have. And then finally, from a paid point of view, we think there's plenty of good examples out there, although they're probably rarer than you think, of entertainment brands that really find that sweet spot between an idea and a media execution, which makes that single execution much bigger than otherwise what it would have been. So the work that Deadpool have recently done, or at a smaller level, some of the tactical stuff and social that Dave have done with the Dave Gorman Show. And it's that kind of execution where media meets creative idea, which is where we really need to focus our attention as we build out heartbeats. And then finally, we have to think also, of course, around how we optimize our spend as we're delivering out your heartbeat campaigns across owned, earned, paid and shared media. We have some tools which will help us do this, and we'll bring those to life a bit more in the pitch for you. We have a tool we built for working with other entertainment brands called Quantum, and simply what it allows us to do is to make sure that whenever we're planning a campaign, and particularly when we're spending paid media, we're understanding very early on exactly what we believe your owned and earned channels are likely to deliver for you, and we can plan paid media to drive incremental value, either over the life cycle of a campaign or over a specific period, for instance around the golden hours. And this is based on your own data, not assumed data, So in the pitch, what we'll do is we'll show you how we plan incrementally and really think about how we use your own media first before we start spending any of your paid media, and point it in the right direction. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the Heartbeats approach. As I said, we'll be taking this approach and applying it to Victoria, Cold Feet and Love Island in the pitch. So you'll see more of how this works on the day itself. So that's a whistle-stop tour of the Heartbeats approach. We'll be bringing this approach to life for the 3 programme briefs around Victoria, Cold Feet and Love Island in more detail for you on Thursday. We hope you enjoy the pitch.